We're even going to see some sleet and snow showers to low levels across the north of Scotland, but certainly snow accumulating over the West Highlands above 200 metres throughout Wednesday itself. Cloud and rain sink south across England and Wales, with sunny spells following, and the rain tends to peter out by the afternoon as well. 12 Celsius in the south, feeling cold in the wind further north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today. And just when you might have started to move on from Partygate, the media is today dominated with talk of more Tory infighting, this time between the PM and the Chancellor. The casualty? Apparently the NHS recovery plan, details of which are now delayed. I wonder, is Boris Johnson ever going to be allowed to just get on with the job? And Camilla is going to be known as Queen Consort when Charles becomes king. I've got to say, there's been a bit of a divided reaction to this. Where do you stand? And Jimmy Carr has sparked outrage, I tell you, for telling a joke. One, albeit, that to many was deeply offensive. What do you reckon? Should there be a line when it comes to free speech? If so, who decides when that line is? And do any of us have a right not to be offended? And Kirsty Allsop reckons that anyone can buy a house if they're willing to make sacrifices. Is she right? Or is she deluded? We'll have all of that to come, but first, the latest news headlines.
Hello there, I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB Newsroom, your top stories. The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has today accused the Chancellor of playing political games with public health after the NHS recovery plan was delayed. The Prime Minister, however, said Number 10 and the Treasury are working together to tackle patient waiting lists in England. At a visit to the Kent Oncology Centre at Maidstone Hospital with the Chancellor, Boris Johnson said the NHS backlog is a government priority.
What we're doing is working together across the whole of government to fix the COVID backlogs, which, believe me, is a massive priority for us, for everybody in the country. And, no doubt about the Chancellor's absolutely not.
Boris Johnson. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said millions of people on the waiting lists are now in desperate need of a plan.
We've had people on waiting lists, not only during COVID, but before COVID we had waiting lists that were far too high. So the government saying we need more time is not going to cut very much ice with those that are on the waiting list. You know, there's a price to be paid by a government that is distracted by all these allegations that are going on, and that price is being paid by the 6 million people who are waiting for their operations.
Keir Starmer. In international news, the French President Emmanuel Macron has met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin amid rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine. During talks in Moscow, Macron told Putin that Europe and Russia need to find a new way to end the standoff over Ukraine. He said a useful response is needed, which allows war to be avoided and trust and stability built. Russia currently has more than 100,000 troops massed on Ukraine's borders. Meanwhile, the UK government has announced it's sending 350 British soldiers to Poland amid continued tensions in the region. They're in addition to the more than 100 Royal Engineers deployed last year to help in the recent dispute between Poland and Belarus. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, says they're being sent as a bilateral signal to show Britain and Poland stand side by side. Here, the Criminal Cases Review Commission is to examine fresh evidence in the case of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell, who were murdered in Kent 26 years ago. It comes after the serial killer Levi Belfield confessed to their murders. Our Home and Security editor Mark White reports.
He is one of the UK's most notorious serial killers. A former nightclub bouncer, Levi Belfield, is serving a whole life sentence for the murders of schoolgirl Millie Dowler, Marcia McDonnell and French student Amélie Delagrange. The revelation he has now confessed to the murders of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell is a startling new development in that 26-year-old crime. Paul Bacon, the lawyer representing the man convicted of those killings, revealed he had now received a signed confession from Belfield. Paul Bacon's client, Michael Stone, has always maintained his innocence, but multiple appeals have been repeatedly rejected. Belfield is said to have revealed new information that could only have been known by the man who attacked Lynn Russell and her daughters in this quiet country lane in Kent. The new evidence will now be examined by the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Mark White, GB News.
The Children's Commissioner says there's still a long way to go on children's mental health, with only a third of young people able to access treatment. Dame Rachel de Souza says some children are waiting too long to start treatment and there are regional disparities on waiting lists. The number of children with mental health conditions has jumped during the 2020 part of the pandemic to 1 in 6. That's up from 1 in 9 in 2017. 3 patients paralysed after spinal cord injuries have been able to walk, cycle and swim using a nerve stimulation device. They were able to take their first steps after neurosurgeons attached an electrical implant to their spines, which is controlled using a touchscreen tablet. It's been developed by Swiss researchers who hope to start a trial in about a year involving 70 to 100 patients. And lastly, a number of gun salutes have been fired today across the United Kingdom to mark Her Majesty the Queen's record 70-year reign. The sound of the Honourable Artillery Company, the oldest regiment in the British Army, firing 62 rounds at the Tower of London today to celebrate the monarch's Platinum Jubilee. There were also gun salutes at London's Green Park and at Edinburgh Castle. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. My panel, we've got Lucy Harris, who's a former Conservative MEP, political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, and Lee Jones, who's a professor of political economy and international relations at Queen Mary University. And you know the drill on Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us here and our thoughts, it's about you at home and yours too. You can get in touch, email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. You guys have already started your emails coming in. Alan says, Prince Charles will be king and Camilla will be queen. No debate, says Alan. But Anne says no to Queen Camilla. Adultery and deception should never be rewarded. That's Anne's view. There you go. Told you it is a subject that divides many. Do let me know your thoughts on that one and the rest of the things that we're going to be discussing. But our top story, patient groups have said that people are suffering while plans to tackle NHS record waiting lists in England are delayed. The scheme to cut the waiting list was supposed to be announced today, but this is now on hold. Why? Well, depends who you believe, but apparently it's because of disagreements within the government. Just as a reminder, 6 million people are waiting for routine hospital treatment in England. Many of them, by the way, have been waiting more than a year. Can you imagine if you're in pain and you're having to wait over a year and still, in many cases, have no end in sight as to when you are going to be seen? Well, you won't be happy then with what's going on today, because a report in the Daily Mail newspaper said that Boris Johnson and Chancellor Rishi Sunak are at loggerheads about all this, with Rishi Sunak apparently blocking the NHS waiting list catch-up plan. Now, come on, we've had all the distractions of Partygate for God only knows how long now, months it feels like. Surely the very last thing we need is more Tory infighting. As I said at the start of the show, I cannot help but ponder, will Boris Johnson ever just be allowed to get on with the job? Nigel Nelson.
Well, I mean, we do know that it's all about money. It's Rishi Sunak who holds the purse strings, I can imagine he may be balking at the cost. We've no idea actually how much this will cost. The other thing is it's going to be very complicated. I mean, one of the ideas that Sajid Javid seems to be working on is to publish waiting lists so you'll be able to see where you are on the waiting list. That could be quite promising in the sense that it would mean that anybody who was, say, low down could think, if I can afford it, I'll go privately, making their way for somebody else to go and do that. So that's one positive. But the trouble about doing the waiting lists is it does become very difficult, because in the event that you see that your local hospital has a huge waiting list, in theory, you could go to another one. Well, of course, everyone will be doing that, so they'll all be crashing in, and they will then have long waiting lists. This was all tried under patient choice and when Andrew Lansley was Health Secretary, when the Tories first got into power in 2010. And he tried this idea whereby you'd be able to see waiting lists, mortality rates, and so on. And his argument was that would raise standards so everyone came up to the best. It just didn't work. For something like a one-off operation, it possibly is okay. If you have a complex condition requiring a lot of treatment, the whole system breaks down. So in addition to the money that Rishi Sunak will inevitably have to find, you've also, I suspect, got the complications of how to make this system work.
Lee?
Well, I think the way this is being covered is unfortunate, because the Rishi-Boris soap opera shouldn't distract us from the bigger question of why the government is being so slow in releasing a recovery plan for the NHS. It is almost 2 years since the government plunged us into lockdown because it had not prepared us properly to face a global pandemic, and it has still not released a recovery plan. So, as you say, 6 million people on the waiting list, likely to peak at 13 million before the number starts to come down. 93,000 vacancies in the NHS. The government threatening to sack a further 80,000 if they don't get vaccinated against COVID. And we have no vision and no plan coming out of the government. This should have been released way before Partygate came to interfere with it, if indeed it is interfering with it. So that's what we should be focusing on, is the dire state that the NHS is in and the social catastrophe that this extent of waiting lists and undiagnosed conditions is going to unleash on us for years to come.
Do you agree with that, Lucy, in terms of why only now are we still waiting for the plan? Why hasn't it been released quite some time ago?
And I think the focus hasn't been on this as it should have been over the past few weeks. It has been focused on Partygate. The media has been focused on this particular issue more so than things that are incredibly important, such as waiting lists, such as the backlog. One thing that I think is particularly important is Sajid Javid's announcement of the War on Cancer initiative that he's currently trying to do a lot of consultations for and asking for evidence from cancer research and lots of different bodies. And I think that is incredibly important, because if I was somebody who was in the backlog, having something weighted on me, such as a cancer diagnosis or waiting for treatment, that is what I would care about the most. And I do question and I do wonder why there hasn't been a discussion previously around cancer and around these particular issues as COVID was unfolding, because as we all know, catching it early prevents deaths.
And Sajid Javid, the plan that you're referring to, isn't that the objective would be to get a diagnosis within 2 months? Is that what he's kind of focusing on or pushing for?
He's looking to make sure that every stage of the process, from when you when you suspect that you might have cancer, to the treatment, to recovery, is as fast as possible. So that's what he is aiming to do. And obviously, that's a really welcome development. I would suggest that this should have already been in the pipeline back in the day when we knew that COVID was unfolding. And I think this is one of those things that's incredibly important. And of course, in his plans is a way to streamline the NHS so that you are able to get everything through the door a little bit faster. I know that that's obviously going to cost money, but I think there's lots of different areas in which you can save money on the NHS and make sure that that £5.4 billion to the NHS during COVID is somehow recoiled back in savings throughout the streamlining process of that.
And Nigel Nelson, if we broaden it beyond just the NHS, obviously we've seen at the weekend some staff changes in and around Boris Johnson's key offices. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, for a start, that Steve Barclay, who's taken on the Chief of Staff role, can't possibly do 3 jobs. The Chief of Staff should be an absolutely full-time position. I would think he'd be working night and day to make that one work.
Yeah, he's an MP.
He's an MP, he runs the Cabinet Office, and now he's got the Chief of Staff role. Bringing Guta Hari, well, it's someone that Boris Johnson actually knows from his days as London Mayor. You can understand that. I hear that an awful lot of people just don't want to work there, and he will have a real struggle trying to appoint his new permanent secretary. The idea is that Downing Street will become another government department. I don't know how that's going to work, but anyway, that's his idea, which means he needs a permanent secretary. And the word on Whitehall is that if you're a high-flying civil servant, what you don't want to do is go and work for a Prime Minister who is on his way out.
Is he on his way out, Lee?
Well, when I saw the head of the number 10 policy unit resign, that's Munira Mirza, I did think to myself that his days must be numbered, because she had stuck with him through thick and thin. She's worked for him for 14 years when he was Mayor of London. And I think she's an incredibly capable and principled person who has stayed out of these factional conflicts and chose to resign over the controversy around Boris's comments on Starmer and Jimmy Savile. And I thought, well, if even she is not willing to stand by him, then the game must be up.
But Lucy, I mean, there's a lot of kind of focus at the moment on the number of no confidence letters. You know, all the time there's another one going in. Of course, we never really know how many are in because it's quite an opaque process. We only know the people that have publicly declared so. But then there seems to be people forgetting that getting your letters, your 54 letters, that doesn't mean Boris is out. No. It could actually survive the vote of no confidence. So I find it quite fascinating that there's such a sense of certainty that Boris is on his way out. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's the next stage of a strategy to get rid of Boris. I think, obviously, if you were looking to get rid of Boris, the next obvious step is to make sure that those letters get in. So a concerted campaign to make sure that happens is obviously the first step, which is probably why, and I welcome the fast change and the fast turnaround that he's invited MPs to become his chief of staff, to become his head of policy. And I think that's a really good move from Boris. It's fast, and it also addresses the issue issue that I think a lot of backbenchers were feeling, that they weren't included in some of the big decisions that were being made down in Whitehall. So I think it's a fantastic manoeuvre on his behalf. Yeah, fantastic. Good.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle, your point about the letters, that at the moment, they haven't got the numbers for the final vote.
Mm.
So it'll take 181 Tory MPs to vote against Boris Johnson to get him out.
Mm-hmm.
And the rebels say, look, they just don't have that figure yet. And the other problem with letters going in is there's a danger you'll get to the 54 by default as they trickle in.
Mm-hmm.
We'll end up having a confidence vote within probably 24 hours. He wins it, and then under Tory rules, he can stay for another year.
Mm-hmm.
So, to all those rebel MPs out there, I'd implore them to not send in letters just at the moment until you're sure you've got that final number.
But that's precisely why this Partygate thing is rumbling on for so long, that it appears to be death by 1,000 cuts, because you've got to keep up the pressure on a sustained basis to build the base of rebel MPs so that they can all trigger a vote at the right time. Because it's very clear this is a sustained campaign to get rid of Boris Johnson, and it is being coordinated behind the scenes.
But it's everywhere.
Well,
It's
I don't think
left,
it's being
right, and
coordinated.
centre.
That's the problem. It should be. I mean, if it was being coordinated, they'd do a better job of doing it.
Not
so those
necessarily.
letters
They're
would
just
go
very
in.
inept.
I don't think that's
way.
necessarily true. I think what you're seeing now is a bit of a fight from inside 10 Downing Street, which is trying to claw back some of the confidence of MPs. And when you have that sort of dichotomy of approach to a strategy, then obviously there's going to be some toing and froing. So therefore, I think there is obviously going to be a bit of a two-prong approach to this. There's going to be those on one side who are trying to keep him in, trying to keep a stability in 10 Downing Street, but then obviously you have on the other side those who would rather get him out. So that's probably why you're not seeing such a consistent and concerted effort, because obviously there is a pushback.
Well, I think the problem is actually the pandemic, because if things had followed the normal pattern, all those new MPs who came in 2019 would have got to know the old-timers and more experienced ones, and between them they would have got together and actually organised this an awful lot better. It's the fact they don't know each other well enough that they can't actually become a cohesive unit to go and deal with what they want to do at the moment.
Well, I say be careful what you wish for, everyone, because who is there to replace Boris Johnson? That's the bit that I don't see an obvious successor waiting in the wings. So be very careful what you wish for, should I say, not who you wish for, although probably the latter is more accurate. Do let me know your thoughts, though, on all of this, the whole Boris thing. Do you worry about this infighting? Lots of people getting in touch already. Glynis is saying, it's just media staring. Jeff says, I'm sick and tired of the Boris witch hunt. See, I've got to say, there are still a lot of people out there that support Boris Johnson. My personal preference is just let him get on with the job. But what's yours? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about lots of different things, but including Camilla. Should she become Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes king? I've got to say, this divides opinion. Let me know your thoughts and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I've got to tell you, there is a lot of support coming in for Boris Johnson. Many of you saying, I'm sick, Rack says, I'm sick of the media and Labour salivating over Nout, she says. Hashtag back Boris. And that is a sentiment that I can tell you is really coming through thick and fast. And we carried on our conversation in the break about who on earth would replace Boris Johnson. This is the bit that I don't... all these people desperately trying to get him out. Who do you want instead? I'm fascinated by your answers. Get in touch and tell me, who do you reckon should be leading this country, if not Boris Johnson? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the Queen has marked her Platinum Jubilee by announcing that Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, will become Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes King. What do you think to this? Some people who support it say yes, it shows that the royals are moving with the times. Others say absolutely not. They blame Camilla for the breakdown of Charles's marriage to Diana. Of course, you remember that whole sentence now, don't you? There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. That's what Diana famously said. So I want to know your thoughts on this. Where do you stand? Lucy?
Where do I stand? I mean, they're married. It's within common law that they should actually, she should get the title of Queen Consort. So for me, it's a traditional thing, and I think that it's the appropriate thing to happen.
Lee?
Well, it's maybe treasonable, especially on the 70th anniversary of the Queen's rule, but I think she shouldn't become Queen Consort because I think the monarchy should be abolished when Queen Elizabeth dies or abdicates.
Me. So you think when the Queen dies, do you think that's it, the end of the royal family?
It should be. I think the monarchy is the linchpin of a very unequal class system. It symbolises the fact that some jobs will always be out of reach to people, regardless of merit. More to the point, it's undemocratic. The head of state should be elected by the people in a democracy. The monarchy is a retrograde throwback.
Well, Nigel Nelson's going to spontaneously compose all the side of the table.
Yeah,
Nigel.
Look, I come from the position that I'm not a royalist, but I am a monarchist. I do think that we are incredibly lucky to have a non-political head of state. And that's what keeps the whole British Constitution, because it's unwritten anyway, the Constitution going. It keeps a certain stability. Once you start getting into elections for a head of state, we're looking at presidents, and I just don't like that idea, and I don't think it would work. When it comes to Camilla, absolutely she should be Queen Consort. Here is a woman who has stood beside the Queen through a lot of troubled times, that when Prince Charles takes the throne, he needs to have the Queen Consort next to him. And this country, I would argue, needs a Queen. So I think that the Queen was absolutely right to make the announcement and to choose the 70 years on the throne to do it, to say, I put my faith in Camilla for the future. I appreciate what happened with Princess Diana. I appreciate that people weren't terribly happy about Camilla's part in the marriage breakup. But I think with so many years on, Camilla is absolutely the right person to take that role.
Lucy?
Well, I'd probably say that, back to Lee's point, the royal family is a fantastic sort of head of state that enables a soft power within our foreign affairs. So they add that benefit to the country. But also, I think they're economically pretty sound. They give some good bang for the British buck by making sure that, I think we give them, if I remember correctly, 42 pence per year per person, and in return they bring in a lot of money from our tourism industry and other industries. So I think, you know, there's absolutely two ways to make sure that, you know, there's a benefit to the royal family, not just in the sense of
Lee's saying they don't bring in that benefit.
They do.
So these are the figures, right? Because this is the thing that people always trot out about the monarchy. It doesn't matter that it's anti-democratic or a linchpin of a class system. Oh, well, at least they bring in money for
I would
tourism.
contest that it's the linchpin of a class system.
Here are the figures, right? The best you can claim for the monarchy is that it brings in £500 million a year in tourism. The net revenue of the UK tourism sector is £127 billion. So the royal family, even at that exaggerated level of 500 million, bring in 0.3% of tourism revenue. Buckingham Palace is less popular as a tourist attraction than Chester Zoo. So let's put this to one side. This is not. Yes, it is.
Are you what about
sure?
London?
Yes, it is.
But what I'd also say is that I
want to come back more importantly to the point that the claim that the monarchy provides a non-political head of state. Prince Charles has shown that he is quite willing to interfere in politics. Anybody watching your show, for example, that's not an environmentalist, will be dismayed when King Charles takes the throne and uses it as a pulpit to preach the Greek
exactly.
cause.
So, Lee, I'd love to come in there because I would say that it's not a linchpin of class anymore. I think we've moved on from that in society, and it's actually I'd say it's a linchpin of values. What do you value? And I think people care more about that, and there's a value system now that
I'm curious,
brings in your status.
What value system do you think the royal family encapsulates? Given that Prince Andrew is wanted on charges of sexual assault in the United States, Meghan and Harry have defected to the United States. What exactly do they
I would say the general public should absolutely be deciding what they should be wanting from their royal family.
But you don't get to decide in a monarchy. You don't get to decide. If you ask the people, they would like the monarchy to skip Charles and go to William and Kate. But you don't get to decide in a monarchy. That's the monarchy.
Well, exactly. And I think there should be a broader conversation around the values that some of the people within the monarchy hold. And that's what I would like the conversation to be around.
Lee, who would you like to be head of state?
Anybody who the people want.
So you would like a president?
We need a president because there are certain constitutional functions that you need a head of state.
So you would like a political royal family?
The royal family is already political. I've already shown that to be the case.
That's a moot point, in fact. I mean, I know that Prince Charles has interfered in politics. It doesn't mean he would do so if he was king. So, I mean, my suspicion is he would remain a non-political monarch. I mean, the idea of having a president means we could end up with, I don't know, President Boris Johnson or something like that. And if you've got a parliamentary democracy, we don't want to lose it.
So you would have a president in addition to the Prime Minister?
Yeah, every country on earth has a head of state, and quite often that is separated from a head of government. And so...
Does it need to be? That's what my question is. Would you have?
It doesn't have to be.
You
can have somebody that combines the two roles. For example, in the United States system, for example, he's the president there is head of state and head of government. We have a tradition of parliamentary democracy and cabinet government, and I think that's a fairly good tradition that we should preserve. And what we need is a relatively ceremonial head of state that can be elected by the people.
There you go. Do you want to elect the head of state? If so, what kind of person? What do you think to that? Lots of you getting in contact, telling me about the whole Camilla and Queen and King situation. Again, it really is divided. For everyone that's writing in saying absolutely yes, there's someone else writing in saying absolutely no. And I'm fascinated by Lee's point, by the way. What do you think to what he's suggesting? Get rid of all the royal family when the Queen does pass away. Would you support something like that or not? GBViews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about quite a few things, actually. But first up, Jimmy Carr. You will have seen that he has been criticised for a joke that he told. How does this work in a free society? Should you be able to offend people? If not, where's the line? Who chooses that? We'll have that and more in just a few minutes.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight. Why have scientists been so determined to suppress debate on the Wuhan lab leak theory? Journalist Matt Ridley reveals what he's uncovered in exploring the origins of COVID for his new book. On a landmark day for the Together Declaration against vaccine passports and mandates, the movement's co-founder Alan Miller breaks down the latest developments on the fight to restore freedom in the UK. Plus, GB News star Neil Oliver and positive professor Carol Sikora bring a dash of optimism and reason that you won't find elsewhere in the media. And I break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, social commentator Esther Kraku, and senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, lots of response to the conversation that we've just been having. Just a quick reminder, by the way, if you're listening to us tonight, as opposed to watching, you've got me, Michelle Dewberry, my panel are Lucy Harris, who's a former Conservative MEP, Nigel Nelson, who's the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, and Lee Jones, who's a professor of political economy and international relations. I tell you, you're getting into trouble with my viewers tonight, Lee. JT and Lee says, get that treacherous Lee off air. He's a disgrace, says JT. Carl says, actually, I'm starting to think it's time to have an elected head of state after the Queen's reign. He goes on there to say you can keep Buckingham Palace, keep all the pomp and ceremony that draws in tourism, but he says the head of state should be elected by the electorate. Well, according to Lee, just tell us that fact again that you were saying about Chester Zoo, because I found this astonishing.
Chester Zoo is more popular a tourist attraction than Buckingham Palace.
What about London? London's quite popular.
Sorry, say again.
London's quite popular and a lot of tourists go to London.
Well, OK, the most popular sort of royal tourist attraction is the Tower of London, which the royal family have not inhabited for years. So following up your viewer's suggestion, we can keep Buckingham Palace, but open it up to tourists. Even more tourists will come. And that's proven by the French experience. They got rid of their monarchy. Versailles Palace is a massive tourist attraction.
Well,
you can give the royal family a council house in Liverpool.
Well, all I can say is that if you added a bit more pomp to politics, I'm not sure where we'll end up.
Well, Lucy says that lots of people travel to London just for the tourism. I've got to say, I know loads of people that you won't be able to pay to come to London. They'd be delighted to stay away from it. Let me know your thoughts on that. Anyway, Comedian Jimmy Carr has blamed cancel culture for the criticism that he's received for making jokes about the Holocaust and about Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities. You might have seen the joke. I won't repeat it on here, but you know, almost that joke aside, if you will, to me it opens up a broader topic of conversation about the kind of whole, the offence culture, I guess. Do you have a right in life not to be offended? And when it comes to what is okay to say and what's not, what is a joke and what is not, who draws that line? Lee, I'll start with you on this one.
I mean, you're right to broaden it out beyond Jimmy Carr, because we do live in a more censorious culture these days. So there was an opinion poll at the end of last year, and it found that 57% of people surveyed in this country say they self-censor out of fear of judgment or negative reaction by others. A third of young people and half of older people think that they will be cancelled by future younger generations. So there clearly is a problem in the wider culture at the moment.
Nigel?
Well, I mean, this is a free speech issue, and I'm an advocate of free speech. However, I think free speech carries with it a responsibility so what you say ought to be wise. Jimmy Carr isn't wise. It is absolutely unacceptable to tell a joke about genocide. And if you're going to take responsibility for free speech, you must also take the consequences. It may be that people won't go and see his shows. It may be Netflix will decide not to continue with him, whatever. But I think that what he said it's not about cancel culture. It is the fact that he said something that was totally inappropriate. A bit similar, in a sense, if you like, to Piers Morgan turning around and saying that Meghan Markle wasn't telling the truth about her mental health issues.
All right, I've got to play devil's advocate here, Nigel. Who decides what's inappropriate? So you're saying it's inappropriate for, let's just say, Piers Morgan to say he didn't believe somebody.
Yeah.
You're saying it's inappropriate to joke about a genocide.
Yes.
Now, who decides? Because that's in your view. What if
the danger is that the only way you can make a decision there is to actually bring in laws on free speech, which I'd rather we didn't. Although we have some. We've got hate speech laws or whatever. So the decision, in fact, is actually almost a public one. It is the reaction to what people are doing. And it's quite clear that there is a huge backlash against Jimmy Carr for what he has said. And as a result of that, there should be consequences from those actions. I don't think it's a finite line. J.K. Rowling, for instance, has expressed opinions whereby she gets a huge backlash. It seems to me that I'd like to hear her explain it, because it sounds a bit confusing when she talks about the difference between sex and gender and seems to confuse both. So it is very much a kind of the public deciding, and things change, obviously, but the public deciding what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And in the present climate, Jimmy Carr's joke is not acceptable.
Lucy?
Yeah, I can follow on with that just by saying that comedy is always about testing boundaries, about what the general public will and won't find funny. And I think it's always really important. I remember watching a few shows by Frankie Boyle, who I don't like his comedy. I think it's too much. It's very offensive. But, you know, it's not up to me to close it down. It's not up to me to say what other people can't watch. I think it's up to the individual what they find acceptable. And, of course, there's consequences to free speech. Of course, there always is. I'd hope that there is consequences to free speech. Otherwise, there's no point in talking in the first place. And I think when it comes to sort of jokes, I think we have to start having a bit of leeway when we come to joking. We have to test the room. We have to understand what the audience will find acceptable. But at the end of the day, it's always about how you present your humour. If it's shock humour, you know it's going to get a laugh. If it's bait and switch humour, you know it's going to get a laugh. And I think it's more of a psychological mechanism that I think comedians use. And often that holds with it quite harsh words and some contestable ideas.
Yeah, I do find this whole kind of thing about, you know, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable such a fine line and also a slippery slope. Lots of you are getting in contact, just saying, you know, Gareth's just been in contact saying, let's be clear, if a comedian can't get a gig at the Apollo, he says, it's pretty much a badge of honour in his mind. But it's just a fascinating one. Again, we've got differing opinions. Stuart has been in touch saying the only speech in his mind which is unacceptable is that which threatens and incites violence, I think he means. He says everyone needs to be educated as to where the off button is. But Stuart, this is my point, I guess. Who decides the off button? Because all of us will have things that we're, sensitive about, topics about, I don't know. One person's off button, to quote Stuart there, will perhaps be in a different position to somebody else's off button. This is the point.
Surely that's what Stuart's saying, that if you don't like it, switch it off. I mean, frankly, the only people that are going to be offended by a Jimmy Carr joke are people that are never going to watch a Jimmy Carr gig. Everybody knows who Jimmy Carr is as a comedian. He is provocative and offensive in the same way that Frankie
Boyle is. And if you
don't like it, don't watch it. The only people moaning and saying he should be cancelled are the people that don't like that kind of comedy. OK, you're not being forced to watch it. If it's being live streamed into everybody's homes and you're forced to watch it at gunpoint, I can understand why people would say, well, the state should step in and do something. That's not the case. I think what Stuart's saying is, if you don't like it, don't watch it. I think that's fair enough.
Is that your point, Stuart? You got your big fat off button on your remote control, hit it. If you don't like what you're hearing, is that your point? Don't hit it now, though, obviously, for Dewbs and Co. Wait until after we've all gone to bed. Keep watching us for the rest of the night. Yeah, and also, when you're talking there, I just had a thought about a guy, you might be familiar with this story, going off on a bit of a topic, but a bit of a tangent, Joe Rogan. He's a very well-known podcaster who has apparently been offensive or presenting COVID misinformation, and I found the backlog over that absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that I found it very fascinating is that a lot of the criticism comes from people that probably never even watched or listened to that particular podcast, and not many of them to form an opinion. So I always find it quite fascinating when people do step up and want to cancel other people.
People should be very worried about the state of free speech in this country. I mean, last week, somebody was sent to prison in this country for making an offensive tweet about Captain Tom, the NHS fundraiser.
Yeah,
we live in a country where if you say something that's mean on Twitter, you can be sent to jail. That cannot be right.
But would you agree, Lee, that there's got to be laws on hate speech that incite racial or religious violence?
I agree with the view that says that the limit to speech should be speech that incites the commission of violence, or it actually is a crime. Right? I don't believe in any other forms of legislation.
Free speech is limited in lots of ways. If Michelle, for instance, suddenly started a string of four-letter words now, you'd be immediately taken off the air, and probably permanently. So your free speech is governed by the rules of broadcasting. There are certain things that you can't do.
But is that, yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm trying to think of my response to that, because you're quite right. We are governed by a code of conduct, if you like, for what we can present at certain times of the day.
Which restricts your free speech.
Yeah, it does to certain degrees, especially within certain points of the day, of course. I think things get a bit...
That is there to protect children, right? It is there to say, before a certain time, the watershed, young people, i.e. not adults, may be exposed to television, and that's not appropriate.
But then often
we're talking about making laws that regulate adult conduct, what adults are allowed to hear, what adults are allowed to say. That is completely different. We shouldn't treat the public, adult citizens, as if they're children. And, oh, you can't hear that, that might upset.
The example that you said, Michelle, around Joe Rogan, I think the worry is that it sort of siphons off a particular political viewpoint. And I think that's where the trouble lies. Often in these circumstances, it's not about what they're saying, it's about who's saying it and what their broader beliefs are. So I think with Joe Rogan, that's a perfect example of that. He might have said something in general that is disagreeable to the people that have been trying to shut him down, but it's all because of his broader political opinion. And I think we should be worried about that.
I think Joe Rogan is being attacked because he platforms people who say controversial things or who spread misinformation. The bigger problem there is the fact that so many of us are now reliant for anything outside of the mainstream on platform capitalism. Spotify, in this case, is the platform being encouraged to shut him down. Facebook, YouTube, exercising powers of censorship, deciding what is acceptable and not acceptable to say. That's actually damaging to the process of democracy. If there are wrong ideas being put out on whatever platform, it's incumbent on those with the right ideas to go out and argue for them and explain why the ideas are wrong, not treat the public like children who shouldn't be exposed to the wrong ideas.
Well, I've got to say, I'm supposed to be talking about Kirsty Allsop and housing and sacrifices. I am very aware that that's the next topic on my radar, but I can't help but just be inspired by the conversation that we're having, because we talk about censorship, and I'm going to take it on a slight tangent now, so I do apologise because I didn't brief you guys that this is what we're going to talk about, but we're talking about kind of controversial opinions and the censorship of opinions that don't follow the narrative. I would almost say, actually, it goes beyond that, because often, not only do you have, in many cases, censorship of a view, you will have the complete smearing of a view just because people don't agree with it. And what I'm thinking about in particular is Justin Trudeau is at the top of my mind when I'm listening to you, actually. About many of you will be aware of the convoy, the trucker convoy in Canada at the moment, and we'll come on to this in a little bit more detail on it maybe tomorrow or something. But you'll be aware of the trucker convoy, and it's all about protesting against the mandates, the vaccine mandates in, for example, Canada. And one of the things that I've found really interesting is you've got a collection of people that feel very strongly that their freedoms are being eroded, that they don't want these vaccine mandates. But then what you then get, and I'll look towards you first for comment on this, Lee, is you have then Justin Trudeau, who really is quite offensive to these people in terms of how he labels them. He calls this viewpoint misogynist, racist, xenophobic, likens it to people like the Nazis. This is what the labels are getting. And it makes people absolutely furious. And that convoy, and by the way, it's getting replicated in different countries, but that convoy is really kind of getting momentum. And I feel the smearing of that viewpoint is one of the reasons why.
Yeah. I mean, what's on show in Canada is what I would call authoritarian liberalism, which is where liberals call for authoritarian measures to suppress anything that they don't like or don't agree with. And this happens in particular whenever anybody from the working class organises to express their own political opinion or to protest their treatment at the hands of the state. So it happened with Brexit. Leave voters were smeared as racists and fascists for 4 years. It happened, for example, with the Gilets jaunes in France.
Yes.
They were immediately smeared as anti-Semites, racists, fascists, etc. And it's happening now with anti-vaxxers. Now, I am not an anti-vaxxer. I am vaccinated. I think vaccines have an important place in our fight against COVID. They also have limitations. It is important that the principle of bodily autonomy is respected and the state does not take on authoritarian powers and seek to compel people to have medical procedures against their will. That is what people are protesting in Canada. And the authoritarian liberals' response is not to argue with them, not to engage in debate, but to smear them as fascists. And it just shows how empty and hollow contemporary liberalism is.
But don't the people of Ottawa have the right to be able to get to work and to go about their daily business? That actually, both sides have rights to go and do things. The truckers have the right to protest, not to actually jam up Ottawa so it can't country, that when it comes down to people sticking their faces to motorways, they have a right to go and stick their face to a tree or something like that won't get in the way, but not to stop people getting to work or ambulances getting to accidents, because we also have rights as well, and you've got to balance those rights, which is why protest is actually allowed in the way it is.
Nobody is talking. This was not the context of the conversation. The context of the conversation we were having is, are people being smeared in order to silence opposition? And I'm saying, well, clearly that is happening, and there's a long track record of this. What should be the correct limits to protest is a separate debate.
Lucy?
And there should be some limits, but I think every time that there's some kind of disruption to say, oh, well, what about our right to get to work? The point of a political protest is meant to create disruption. That's how you're supposed to get your voice heard.
I think your thoughts briefly.
Well, the whole point of the protest is because they don't have any freedom. They can't get on a plane. They're being told that they have to take a mandatory vaccine. And then this concept of, they're blocking other people's freedom. We're talking about a more fundamental freedom here. It's the philosophical freedom of the individual to decide what they want to do with themselves, their own bodies, their own time. And I think that's a worthy cause to put your name to. And I think, all pedal to the metal with the truckers in Ottawa. But one thing that this definitely is it's a communication strategy. And I think people have to wise up as to when they are being sort of communicated as racist or what have you. It's because they want to bury the point, and the point here is freedom.
Well, indeed. What do you think to that? Malcolm has just tweeted in, referencing someone that I've got to say I do actually remember from my younger years. Make of my sense of humour then what you will. He talks about Roy Chubby Brown. Do you remember him? He points out that he was banned from a certain venue because organisers said it was not appropriate for their audience. But he goes on to say that he does fill venues where he performs, so why don't you let the public decide and stop this wokeness? Well, that's Malcolm's view. Let me know yours. Very briefly, I'll move on to this next story. Sorry about my tangent there, but I think it's a very important one. Now, you might have seen the TV presenter Kirsty Allsop. She has sparked a heated debate after suggesting that young people could afford to buy a house if they stop paying for Netflix and gym memberships and coffees, etc. She goes on to say that young people could move in with their parents or find houses up north. By the way, I think it's worth pointing out that Kirsty, I think she got a bit of family help to get on the property ladder herself, which is very nice if you can get it, but most people cannot. Lucy, is it simple for all these people that just sit there saying, I can't get on the housing ladder? Is the answer, well, cancel your Netflix and your gym membership then, away you go.
I think we tot that up. That's probably about 100, I mean, I don't know, but cancelling it all, it doesn't add up over a period of time that you would need to get the average house prices in this country of £250,000. I mean, if you're looking at the cost of living crisis, the increase in inflation, increase in energy bills, even here in London, just getting renting out a house is about £2,000 for a 2-bed flat in Zone 2. So you're paying the majority of your income on rent anyway. So it makes it almost next to impossible to save up for a deposit. And without family help, I just don't see a way forward for ordinary young people across the country.
Nigel?
Well, things have changed. That houses used to be an awful lot cheaper relatively to what they are now. And wages haven't gone up at the same kind of rate as the housing market. So it is obviously going to become much more difficult if you're starting out as a first-time buyer to get that amount of money together to actually go and buy a house. And, you know, as Lucy says, deposits themselves are a problem. In fairness, governments have tried to get round that, but still haven't. And I really feel for young people today how difficult it is to actually get on the housing market.
Lee?
Yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous comment, and it's so ill-founded. You have to think it's just made to be provocative. I mean, if you were born in the 1950s, you could buy an average home in your 20s, so in 1979, let's say, for £16,800. That's 4 times the average pay. Today, house prices are 14 times higher, and wages have only risen 7-fold. So the average home today costs over 8 times the average salary, and the average age at which people can buy has gone up from early 20s to 33. So house price growth has been double wage growth. That's the underlying problem, that we're not building enough houses in this country, and houses have become an investment asset rather than something for people to live in. That's the problem that young people have today. It's not the fact that they're spending £6 a month on Netflix.
You guys, lots of your thoughts coming in on all the things we've been talking about today. Holly says, on the whole kind of free speech thing, why should internet users be policed and prosecuted for posting hurty words while comedians can go on and say what they like? Simon says, Jimmy Carr is a comedian, always near the mark. Let him do what he's paid for, and if you're offended, don't watch. Very simple. Lots of you saying, Warren says, anyone who says I'm an advocate of free speech, however, is not an advocate of free speech. Lots of you guys getting in touch as well about the whole monarchy situation. Wilma says yes to the head of state. Alan says Dewbs for the head of state. I say to Alan, are you mad? No, thank you.
Michelle,
anyway,
you're already a screen queen. So.
Oh, yeah, honestly, you don't want me running this country, I can assure you of that. Anyway, that is all we've got time for tonight. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and thank you as well to my panel, Lee, Nigel and Lucy. I will be back at exactly the same time tomorrow, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. So you have yourself a very good evening in the meantime, and I'll see you then.
Hello again. Cloudy skies overnight will bring outbreaks of rain to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, and act as a blanket for much of the country, particularly in the south, where it will be a mild night. A few cloud breaks are possible for central and southern parts of the UK, but even here, enough of a breeze to keep things stirred up and mild. Heavy rain pushes south across Scotland, arriving into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and northern England by dawn. 7 to 10 Celsius for much of England, Wales, central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but for the north of Scotland, 2 to 5 Celsius. Colder here because the front has moved south, and colder, brighter weather follows for Central Belt northwards. And really through Tuesday, we're going to see further blustery showers for much of northern and western Scotland, those showers falling as snow above 300 or 400 metres. But for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, it stays cloudy with some light outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the day. Further south again, dry with even some sunshine for the Midlands, East Anglia, southern counties of England, South Wales, 12 to 14 Celsius in places here. Staying breezy